Picture yourself in complete darkness, hundreds of feet underground, with nothing between you and a fatal fall except a cheap rope from a hardware store. Or imagine dancing at the coolest underground party of your life, only to take one wrong step and disappear into the earth forever. What I'm about to share with you today involves real people who faced exactly these nightmares, and not everyone made it out alive. Welcome back to Pause Inside. I'm here to take you through the darker side of adventure, the stories where excitement meets tragedy, and where one bad decision can change everything. Today, we're exploring two cave disasters that'll make you think twice before heading underground unprepared. We've got a tragic party gone horribly wrong in Mexico, and three teenagers in Montana whose survival story is equal parts lucky and absolutely insane. Fair warning, these stories get intense, so let's jump right in. Our first story takes us to San Luis Potosí, Mexico, on a blistering hot day in July 2005. Five friends, Miguel, Carlos, Alejandro, Alio, and Daniel, were loading up a pickup truck, excited about what they thought would be the most epic weekend ever. Now, here's where things get concerning from the start. When you looked at what they were packing, you'd see coolers absolutely stuffed with beer and tequila, a huge portable speaker, and regular camping tents. What you wouldn't see, any actual caving equipment. No helmets, no proper ropes, no backup lights, basically nothing you'd actually need to survive in a cave system. So how did this trip even come about? Well, Miguel had stumbled across these incredible photos on social media of an underground rave happening inside a cave called Cueva de los Caballos. It looked absolutely incredible online, exactly the kind of adventure that gets thousands of likes. Without bothering to research the location or understand the actual dangers involved, they just decided to go for it. Their combined knowledge about caving, you could probably fit it on a post-it note. They were about to enter a complex and dangerous geological area with nothing but their phone flashlights and way too much alcohol. By late afternoon, they arrived at the site. The scene was already wild. Cars parked everywhere, people streaming toward the cave entrance, everyone buzzing with anticipation for the rave that night. The group quickly set up their tents, and before they even finished securing the last tent stake, beers were already being cracked open. Here's a detail that becomes absolutely critical later on. The weather forecast had actually predicted heavy rainfall, but in all their excitement, nobody bothered to check. They just grabbed their drinks and started making their way toward the cave entrance, following the deep bass of the music echoing from underground. The path was already getting muddy from some light showers earlier that day. They were slipping around, laughing about it like it was all part of the adventure. Daniel actually tripped hard over a tree root and twisted his ankle pretty badly on the way there, but he just brushed it off, took another drink, and kept limping forward. That was the energy of the whole group, reckless, feeling invincible, and completely oblivious to the danger they were walking into. When they finally reached the cave entrance, the party was absolutely wild. We're talking hundreds of people packed into this massive natural cavern, music bouncing off the walls, the whole scene lit up with colorful lights. For the next several hours, these five friends just completely lost themselves in it. They drank more, they danced, and eventually they started wandering deeper into the cave system than anyone was supposed to, casually ignoring the flimsy "Do Not Enter" signs that were taped onto the rocks. Around midnight, everything changed. Outside the cave, the sky absolutely unleashed. I'm talking about rain coming down in thick, heavy sheets, a serious storm. Inside the cave, though, the party kept going strong. But Miguel, who by this point was heavily intoxicated, decided they were running low on alcohol. He wanted to walk back to the truck to grab more. His friends immediately tried to talk him out of it. They pointed out the obvious. He was drunk, it was pitch black outside, and the storm was getting worse by the minute. But Miguel had that dangerous combination of liquid courage and stubbornness. He insisted he'd be fine. Alejandro, who was slightly less drunk than Miguel, but definitely not sober, decided he couldn't let his friend go alone. So he grabbed an empty bag and followed him out into the night. Stepping outside that cave was like stepping into absolute nothingness. Neither of them had a flashlight. Their phone batteries had died hours ago from recording videos of the party. The only light they had came from occasional lightning strikes that would flash for just a split second, briefly illuminating the muddy ground before plunging them right back into total darkness. Miguel walked ahead, swinging that empty bag around, acting confident that he knew exactly where he was going. Alejandro stumbled a few paces behind, fighting against the thick mud that kept pulling at his shoes with every step. Then the wind really picked up, driving the rain straight into their faces. Miguel started walking faster, trying to outpace the storm. But in that darkness, without any landmarks visible, he drifted off the actual path. During one brief flash of lightning, he glanced down and thought he saw solid ground stretching out in front of him. He took a confident step forward. He was completely wrong. The peaceful sound of rainfall was suddenly shattered by the distinct sound of breaking glass and a short, terrified scream that was cut off almost immediately. Miguel had stepped directly into the opening of Sotano de Zoconostle, a vertical pit cave that drops straight down into the earth. This wasn't just a small fall. Miguel plummeted 79 feet straight down on the first drop. Then his body tumbled down a steep 20-foot slope, only to go over another edge for a final 62-foot fall. The impact was absolutely devastating. Alejandro stood frozen in place. The sound of that shattering glass, followed by the sudden, terrible silence, sobered him up instantly. He screamed Miguel's name into the darkness over and over. No response, just the relentless sound of rain pounding against the rocks around him. Pure panic took over. Completely disoriented and terrified, Alejandro somehow managed to stumble back to the cave entrance to get help. When he told the others what happened, the confusion instantly turned to horror. Carlos, Alio, and Daniel, still drunk but now filled with dread, ran out into the storm, desperate to find their friend. Fortunately, someone at the party managed to get a cell signal and called the authorities, but there was nothing anyone could do in the darkness and the storm. Specialized cave rescue teams arrived at dawn when the rain finally began to let up. The 4 surviving friends, now painfully sober and dealing with brutal hangovers, led the rescue teams to where Miguel had disappeared. The contrast between the professionals and the friends was heartbreaking. The rescuers arrived with helmets, harnesses, proper ropes, and powerful lights. They knew exactly what this pit was. To them, it was a documented geological hazard. To Miguel, it had just been a shadow in the dark. The rescue team carefully rigged their lines and rappelled down into the pit. At the bottom, surrounded by shards of broken beer bottles, they found Miguel. The medical examiner later confirmed that he died instantly on the first impact. In such a senseless tragedy, it was perhaps the only mercy. When the news broke, the caving community wasn't surprised, just deeply saddened. This was a textbook example of what not to do. A combination of ignorance, intoxication, and complete lack of respect for a dangerous environment. Miguel didn't die because the cave was somehow evil or cursed. He died because he treated a legitimately dangerous environment like it was just another party spot. As his body was brought up to the surface, his friends watched, suddenly realizing just how pointless the beer, the speakers, and the entire party seemed now. New warning signs were posted around the area afterward, and underground raves were officially banned at the location. But signs can only do so much. You can't force people to respect the ground beneath their feet. That has to come from within. Now, before we get into the second story, which somehow manages to be even more chaotic, I want to ask you something. Both of these stories involve people seeing something that looked cool online or hearing about an adventure and just diving in without any real preparation. Have you ever done something risky just because you saw it on social media or because everyone said it was the thing to do? I genuinely want to know what situations you found yourselves in. Drop your stories in the comments below. I read through them and am honestly curious. All right, let's head to Montana. It's August 20th, 2015. This story is incredibly frustrating because it involves 3 18-year-olds who actually had a plan. The problem is their plan was possibly the worst caving plan in recorded history. 2 guys and a girl decided they wanted to explore Ophir Cave. They met up in the morning all excited and ready to go. But just like our previous group, they were dangerously unprepared. Let's go through their gear list. Helmets? Nope. Warm clothing? Not a chance. They were wearing regular street clothes, even though the cave maintained a constant temperature of about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to cause hypothermia. Lights? Each person had 1 flashlight, no backups whatsoever. If a light died, that person would be left completely blind in the darkness. But the truly terrifying part was their climbing equipment. Ophir Cave has serious vertical drops. We're talking major depth. You need static ropes, proper harnesses, and ascenders to safely navigate it. What did these kids bring? A cotton utility rope from Walmart.
This type of rope has a working load limit of maybe 200 pounds, barely enough to hold a person's weight, and definitely not designed to withstand the shock of a fall. And for anchors, they brought folding kayak anchors. You know, those little metal hooks you toss into the mud to keep a small fishing boat from drifting. Their plan was to just wedge these into cracks in the rocks and hope for the best. Before they left, one of the guys made a joke to his coworker. He said something like, "Hey, if I don't show up for work tomorrow, it's because I'm stuck in a cave." That throwaway comment would end up being the only reason anyone knew where to look for them. They entered the cave around 6 in the evening. As they went deeper, the temperature dropped noticeably, and the darkness became absolute. About an hour into their exploration, they hit their first major obstacle, a 30-foot vertical drop.
This is where their nightmare logic really kicked in. They wedged that boat anchor into a crack in the rock, tied knots in their Walmart rope to create makeshift handholds, and the two guys lowered themselves down. The girl stayed at the top, too nervous to attempt it just yet. Just imagine hanging 30 feet in the air, putting your complete trust in a $10 rope and a boat anchor meant for calm water. The rope was stretching and bouncing with every single movement, but somehow, against all odds, both guys made it down safely. Then they discovered a second drop. This one was 60 feet deep. Their flashlights couldn't even reach the bottom when they shined them down. But incredibly, they did it again. They tossed another anchor down, hoped it would catch on something solid, and climbed down into the darkness below. Halfway down this second drop, disaster struck. One of the guys slipped. His foot kicked loose a rock, sending it tumbling down where it smashed into his friend waiting below, slicing open his shoulder and arm. His scream echoed off the cold stone walls. But adrenaline is an incredibly powerful thing. He insisted he was okay enough to keep going, and they continued exploring deeper. The cold was starting to catch up to them, though. After hours of wandering through the lower chambers, hypothermia began setting in. Their fingers were going numb, their energy was completely drained, and they finally realized they needed to get out of there. They made their way back to the 60-foot drop to climb out, but here's the massive problem with their entire plan. Climbing down a knotted rope is challenging. Climbing up 60 feet of stretching, thin cotton rope when you're exhausted and freezing cold, it's nearly impossible. They tried repeatedly, over and over again, but their muscles just gave out. They were stuck at the bottom of the pit with no way up. They yelled up to their friend, the girl who was still waiting at the top of the first drop, telling her they were trapped and couldn't get out. She realized she had to go get help. But now she was alone in a dark cave with a dimming flashlight, trying to navigate a maze of identical-looking tunnels. What should have been maybe a 15-minute walk back to the exit turned into a nightmare. She got completely turned around. Every passage looked exactly the same. Her light was fading. Panic set in hard. She spent hours wandering in circles, unable to find her way out. So now you have one teenager lost in the upper tunnels and two trapped at the bottom of a 60-foot pit. Down below, the situation was becoming critical. The injured guy was in really bad shape. The cold was making his wounds stiffen up, and the pain was intensifying. Both of them were shaking uncontrollably from the cold. Then they did something that showed just how desperate and panicked they'd become. They decided they needed warmth more than they needed an escape route. So they took their rope, literally their only way out of that pit, cut it into 6-inch pieces, and set it on fire. Think about that for a second. They burned their only bridge to safety. Those little fires gave them almost no actual heat, but the smoke filled the tight cavern, choking them and burning their lungs. Now they were cold, injured, trapped, and unable to breathe properly. Morning came to the outside world, but deep in that cave, time had lost all meaning. They were on the verge of completely giving up. Remember that joke about work? Well, the next morning, when the guy didn't show up for his shift, his coworker remembered what he'd said. He drove straight to the teen's house, saw nobody was home, and immediately headed to the cave entrance. He found their truck parked outside. He rushed into the cave and found the girl just inside the entrance. She'd been wandering lost for 12 straight hours, completely exhausted and terrified. She told him the others were still trapped deep inside. The call went out to Lewis and Clark's search and rescue. These professionals showed up with legitimate equipment, static lines, bolting kits, proper hauling systems, the works. They rappelled down and found the two boys huddled together in the darkness, surrounded by the charred remains of their rope. They were blue with cold, severely dehydrated, and barely responsive. The rescuers were absolutely shocked when they saw the burned rope. It was clear evidence of how irrational the human mind becomes when pure panic takes over. Getting them out wasn't easy at all. The rescue team had to set up a complex pulley system to haul the boys up the vertical shafts that had trapped them for a full 24 hours. It took 4 hours of intense, careful labor to get them both to the surface. When they finally emerged to daylight, they were squinting against the brightness and shaking violently. They were immediately wrapped in thermal blankets and rushed to get medical attention. They had narrowly escaped severe hypothermia and very likely death. Later on, the teens admitted something absolutely crazy. They had actually used this exact boat anchor and clothesline method in this same cave, and it had worked fine. That previous success had given them a completely false sense of confidence that nearly cost them their lives. Both of these stories share one critical thread: overconfidence combined with severe underpreparation. Whether it's an underground party in Mexico or what seems like a simple day trip in Montana, caves are environments that demand complete respect. They're beautiful and fascinating, absolutely, but they're also completely unforgiving of mistakes. Miguel paid the ultimate price for a single moment of carelessness in the dark. The Montana teenagers survived, but they'll carry the memory of those 24 hours of cold, dark terror for the rest of their lives. And hopefully they learned that a boat anchor belongs on a boat, not wedged into a crack as a climbing anchor in a vertical shaft. If you found these cautionary tales valuable, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps Pause Inside reach more people. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you don't miss our next story. Stay safe out there, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next one.